General Hospital will reveal. Amid mounting tensions and escalating legal threats, Diane and Alxis quietly joined forces to confront a major threat, a blackmail plot that could no longer be ignored. After Ava continued to manipulate and harm Alxis, they realized they could not let the situation continue any longer. With Diane's help, someone with a sharp and objective perspective, they began to devise a plan to turn the tide. Diane, with her extensive experience and long-standing connections in the legal field, suggested a clever way to trap Ava without drawing attention. As Ava's threats grew more dangerous, Alxis found herself trapped. After a series of manipulative actions, Alxis realized she couldn't sit idly by and hope things would pass. Ava had repeatedly exploited her vulnerabilities, pushing Alxis into difficult situations and even jeopardizing her with serious legal risks. At the same time, Ava kept manipulating things, forcing Alxis to act in her favor under the threat of exposing secrets that Alxis desperately wanted to keep hidden. However, Alxis knew she could no longer live in fear and submission. With her decisive nature and keen insight, Diane was the only one who could offer a clear solution. Aware that every move had to be executed carefully to avoid Ava's suspicions, Diane decided to approach the situation with meticulous attention to detail. Unlike many others in this scenario, Diane didn't rely on haste or personal emotion. She maintained her calm and logical approach, analyzing the situation carefully. With years of experience in the legal profession, Diane crafted a plan to confront Ava in a way that would remain undetected. She knew that to deal with Ava, a master of deception and manipulation, they needed to use the very weapons Ava believed would protect her. To trap Ava without causing suspicion, Diane decided to leverage her wit and persuasive abilities. She meticulously gathered information and recorded crucial evidence that Ava was unaware of. Under Diane's guidance, Alxis began collecting documents and recording the actions Ava had taken over the past weeks. Every gesture, every phone call Ava made was covertly documented. Diane also arranged several meetings between Alxis and Ava where Ava wouldn't suspect anything was out of the ordinary. One evening, when Alxis unexpectedly encountered Ava at a secluded location, Diane had secretly set up a hidden camera to record the moment Ava accepted money from Alxis, an act that seemed harmless to Ava but became a powerful piece of evidence against her. Diane knew that the goal wasn't just to obtain evidence but to create an irrefutable scenario. With this, she and Alxis could prove that Ava had taken advantage of Alexis's weakness to pressure her into giving money and keeping silent about the secrets Ava held. Recording Ava accepting money was an essential step, but Diane understood that more would be needed to complete the plan. Diane didn't just want to remove Ava from Alexis's life, she wanted to ensure Ava could never hurt anyone again. With the evidence carefully prepared, Diane and Alxis continued to track Ava's every move, always ready to act when necessary. However, Diane never overlooked the smallest details. Knowing that a tiny mistake could cause the entire plan to unravel, she continued to perfect the next steps, including preparing legal documents to ensure that when Ava was exposed, there would be no way for her to escape the consequences. Alongside this, Diane didn't forget to warn Alxis about the danger they faced. She reminded Alxis that this was a battle not easily won and that Ava would not back down easily. But she also reassured Alxis that everything was in place to make Ava pay for her actions. Alxis, although anxious and full of fear, understood that this was her only chance to break free from Ava's control and protect herself and her family. Alxis knew that if they didn't act now, the consequences would be even more severe. Therefore, she chose to continue collaborating with Diane, trusting the plan Diane had devised. With a solid strategy in place, Diane and Alxis prepared for the next step in their plan. Everything was nearly complete, and now it was time to confront Ava. Although everything still felt tense and dangerous, with the evidence in hand, they were ready to reverse the situation and eliminate this threat once and for all. Their first course of action was to collect evidence, and Diane, Eva, the sharp strategist, expertly captured footage of Ava accepting money from Alxis. This was not just a simple transaction. It was a pivotal moment that exposed the manipulative relationship Ava had been building, one that had coerced Alxis into making decisions that were harmful to her. It was clear now that Ava was exploiting Alexis's vulnerabilities, forcing her into a position where she felt powerless and obligated to comply with her demands. This recording became an invaluable piece of evidence, a key that could unlock the truth about Ava's manipulative behavior. But Diane wasn't satisfied with just one piece of evidence. She knew that to take Ava down, she would need more, much more. Diane's instincts told her that Ava would do whatever it took to escape the consequences of her actions. So she carefully and methodically began to track every one of Ava's moves. Diane set up a network of surveillance that would keep Ava under constant watch, ensuring that no illegal activity went unrecorded. Every time Ava tried to manipulate someone or skirt the law, Diane made sure it was documented. This wasn't just about capturing a single moment of blackmail, it was about building an airtight case that could withstand any challenge in a courtroom. Diane's meticulous approach ensured that every step Ava took, every shady deal she made, and every threat she issued to Alxis was captured on tape, in writing, or as a recorded conversation. This evidence didn't just give them a chance to expose Ava's corruption, it provided them with the leverage needed to ensure that Ava could no longer escape the consequences of her actions. Diane knew that, in the world of high-stakes legal drama, it wasn't enough to have a few clues, she needed a comprehensive, undeniable trail that would leave Ava no room to maneuver. For Alxis, this was more than just a matter of personal revenge or justice, it was a choice she made to protect her daughter, Christina, from a life behind bars. Alxis had long been caught in a battle between the desire to protect her family and the fear of losing everything. Christina's past actions had already led her down a dangerous path. And the consequences of those actions threatened to tear their family apart. If Alxis didn't act now, the legal system might be the least of her worries. Christina's involvement in the crime she had unknowingly committed, cutting the brake lines of Rick's car, which almost led to his death, had already placed her at risk of facing charges that could send her to prison for years. By taking down Ava, Alxis wasn't just protecting herself, she was buying time for Christina. It was the only way to ensure that Christina could get the help she needed before her life spiraled out of control. If Alxis didn't stop Ava from continuing her manipulation, Christina would have no way of escaping the harsh penalties that awaited her. By ensuring that Ava's own criminal actions were exposed, Alxis was securing a future for Christina that wouldn't be defined by the dark shadow of prison. This was a mother's sacrifice, a mother's battle for the future of her daughter. And it weighed heavily on Alexis's heart. However, despite her determination, Alxis was also well aware of the emotional cost of this decision. Every time she reviewed the evidence, every time she saw how deep Ava's manipulation went, Alxis felt the burden of the choices she had made in the past. She had put herself in this position, and now, the only way out was through this hard, unforgiving path. It was a painful realization, but it was also a clear one. Alxis had no choice but to fight fire with fire. To use the very tools Ava had used to manipulate her against her. And Diane, with her brilliant legal mind and unwavering focus, was her greatest ally in this fight. As Diane continued to gather evidence, Alexis's resolve grew stronger. Each piece of documentation, each incriminating conversation, and each captured moment of Ava's deceit pushed them closer to their goal. They were not just collecting evidence, they were building a case that would not only bring Ava to justice but also free Alxis from the suffocating grip Ava had on her. The stakes had never been higher, and the tension was palpable. Diane and Alxis were on the brink of a dangerous confrontation with a woman who had no intention of going down without a fight. But for Alxis, this was the only path forward. By taking down Ava, she would not only be securing her own freedom but also giving her daughter a fighting chance. The battle for their futures had begun, and nothing would stop them from seeing it through to the end. The tension between Diane and Alxis had reached its peak. Hours had been spent in a quiet, urgent flurry of activity, each moment more critical than the last. There was no room for hesitation, no time to second-guess their decisions. The weight of the situation loomed over them. And both knew that every second counted. If they didn't act now, everything they had worked for would come crashing down around them. Alxis felt the burden of responsibility pressing heavily on her chest as the consequences of inaction became more and more apparent. She had come to understand, perhaps more clearly than ever before, that failure to act would have devastating repercussions, not just for herself but for her entire family. If she did nothing, the unrelenting grip Ava had on her would only tighten, pushing her deeper into a corner from which there would be no escape. Worse still, the damage Ava had already done could unravel the fragile fabric of Alexis's family, especially with Christina's future hanging in the balance. The fear of losing her daughter to the consequences of her past mistakes was too great to ignore. Despite the exhaustion and anxiety that had overtaken her, Alxis knew that this was the only option left. Every day, every hour she spent in limbo, felt like a countdown to disaster. Ava's manipulations had already cost Alxis so much, and she could not afford to let it continue any longer. But this decision, this plan, was not just for her own sake, it was for Christina. Alexis's heart ached as she thought about her daughter, the girl she had tried so hard to protect, who had found herself in increasingly dangerous circumstances due to her own reckless choices. The sins of the past had led to this moment, and Alxis had only one chance to rewrite the future. Her mind raced as she thought of Christina, still so young, still so vulnerable, and yet trapped in a web of her own mistakes. Christina's involvement in the car incident with Rick had been the catalyst for everything that followed, and Alxis knew that if she didn't act now, Christina would be left to face the consequences alone. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and failure was not an option. It was hard for Alxis to reconcile with the idea that the very daughter she had fought so hard to protect was now at the center of a storm that could destroy everything. The realization was painful but undeniable. In order to save Christina from a future filled with regret, Alxis had to confront the dangerous reality that Ava represented. She couldn't afford to keep tiptoeing around Ava's power anymore. She had to fight back, even if it meant taking extreme measures. Diane's plan, although risky and fraught with potential pitfalls, was the last chance Alxis had to regain control of her life and her family's future. Diane, ever the level-headed strategist, had continued to push Alxis forward, reminding her that time was running out. With each passing hour, they were getting closer to the moment when they would be ready to expose Ava's criminal behavior. The evidence they had gathered was more than enough to bring Ava down, but the final steps were the most dangerous. Diane knew that Ava was not a woman who would go down easily, she would fight back with everything she had. But Diane also knew that they had no other choice. They couldn't afford to back down now. For Alxis, the weight of the decision was almost unbearable. She had spent years trying to protect her daughter, trying to shield her from the consequences of her own mistakes. But now she realized that the only way to truly protect Christina was to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. The truth about Ava, the truth about Christina's role in the crime, and the truth about the destructive patterns that had been allowed to fester for far too long. If Alxis didn't act now, she would be condemning her daughter to a future of prison cells and lost opportunities. There was no going back. But with the plan in place and the evidence mounting, the time had finally come to take action. Diane's expertise and Alexis's determination had brought them to this moment, and the final steps were almost within reach. The evidence they had gathered was indisputable: Ava's attempts at manipulation, her efforts to blackmail Alxis, and the threats she had made were all on record. As Alxis took a deep breath and prepared to carry out the final stages of their plan, she felt a surge of determination. She was no longer just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her daughter, for their future, and for the chance to finally put an end to the chaos that Ava had brought into their lives. The time for hesitation had passed. Now, it was time to act. In the end, it was clear: The only way forward was to confront Ava head-on, expose her for the manipulative, dangerous person she was, and ensure that Alexis's family could finally move on from the nightmare she had caused. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without consequences, but it was the only choice Alexis had left. And as Diane's plan took shape, Alexis knew that the end of this long, painful chapter was finally within sight. With the legal documents prepared and ready, Diane continued to press Alexis, reinforcing the critical importance of taking immediate action. This wasn't just about legal protection, this was about providing Christina with the help she desperately needed before it was too late. Diane was keenly aware of the complexities of the situation and the consequences of inaction. She understood that for Alexis, this was not just a matter of securing her own future, but also of ensuring that her daughter, Christina, had a chance at a better life. Christina's downward spiral had reached a breaking point, and if they didn't act soon, the repercussions could be catastrophic for her. Both women knew that the truth needed to be exposed, no matter how painful it might be. For too long, the lies and manipulations had kept Christina trapped in a world of guilt, confusion, and fear. The longer they allowed the situation to fester, the more it threatened to destroy her. The truth about Christina's involvement in the accident, the conspiracy of silence surrounding it, and the toll that Ava's blackmail had taken on the family, it all had to come to light. The only way to stop the endless cycle of torment Christina was enduring was to confront it head-on. But Diane, with her steady hand and clear legal understanding, reminded Alexis that this moment was crucial, not just for Christina's future, but for her own as well. They had to act quickly, but they had to act with caution. Alexis, though filled with fear and uncertainty, knew deep down that there was no other choice. Every day that passed, Christina grew more entangled in the web of deceit and guilt. The longer they delayed, the harder it would be to pull her out of the darkness. But Alexis also understood that the action they were about to take was not without risks. Exposing the truth, unveiling the depths of Ava's manipulations, and confronting the long-buried secrets of her own family, those were not easy things to do. There was a real possibility that the truth would hurt more than it healed, but Alexis also realized that silence had already caused irreparable damage. They both knew that the consequences of inaction would be far worse than any fallout that might come from their efforts. The risks were many, and the challenges were numerous. Ava, a woman of incredible power and cunning, would not allow herself to be exposed without a fight. She had already manipulated the situation to her advantage once, and there was no telling what lengths she might go to in order to retain her control over Alexis and Christina. Yet, as Diane had reminded Alexis time and again, doing nothing was the true gamble. Christina's future was at stake, and without action, she could be lost to the darkness forever. The sense of urgency that hung in the air was palpable. Both women understood the gravity of what they were about to do, and the weight of their decision bore heavily on them. But they also recognized that this was the only way forward. There was no turning back now. They were at a crossroads, and any further hesitation would only ensure that they lost everything: family, trust, and their own sense of peace. Diane's voice was firm, yet compassionate, as she reassured Alexis that although the road ahead would be filled with uncertainties, they had to trust in the process. The evidence they had gathered, the plans they had put in place, and the strength of their convictions would be their guides through the storm. Still, Alexis struggled with the enormity of it all. Her hands shook as she clutched the legal documents that Diane had painstakingly prepared. Every word, every clause, seemed to carry the weight of her family's future on its shoulders. She could no longer pretend that this wasn't happening. She had to make the decision to move forward, to take the first step toward exposing the truth, no matter the cost. Christina needed her. And deep down, Alexis knew that if she didn't act now, her daughter would be lost forever. As Diane's words sank in, Alexis steeled herself for the inevitable confrontation with Ava. There would be no more hiding, no more waiting for things to resolve themselves. The truth would be revealed, and the consequences, though unknown, would be faced head-on. Alxis wasn't sure if she was strong enough to bear the weight of everything that would unfold, but she knew that there was no turning back. The night before they were set to confront Ava, Alxis barely slept. Her mind raced with scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. She thought about the emotional toll this would take on Christina, and the painful revelations that would come to light. But amidst the chaos of her thoughts, one thing became clear: she couldn't afford to let fear dictate her choices. She had to act. When the time finally came, Alxis and Diane stood together, both resolved, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily on them. Diane's experience in handling high-stakes legal battles was invaluable, but Alxis had her own strength, the kind that comes from being a mother, willing to do anything to save her child. Their next steps would be critical, and while they couldn't predict what would happen, they were ready to face the challenges ahead. They were united in their determination. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. This was the only way to stop the endless cycle of darkness that had enveloped Christina's life. The time had come to act. And though the risks were high and the challenges formidable, both Diane and Alxis knew that they were making the only choice that would allow them to move forward with their lives and secure a future for Christina. No matter what happened next, they were prepared to face it together.